like we said, this presentation is covering how California is increasing post-secondary options for young adults with intellectual disability. I'll throw it out there as well that students with developmental disabilities, most specifically autism, are also included in these post-secondary education programs. So what I want to do is kind of give a history of post-secondary options for students with intellectual and developmental disabilities in California, and to try and be a good educator to eliminate jargon. That's what ID/D stands for, intellectual and developmental disabilities. I want to talk about the current state of post-secondary options, both nationally and in California, to give you an idea of where we stand in the grand scheme of things for how many inclusive post-secondary education programs there are, and where California is and is not represented there. I also want to compare some of the post-school benefits of post-secondary education options. So when I say post-secondary education, I mean anything that students are engaged in from age 18 onward. So I know, we work in pre-K to 12 plus, where students have opportunities in the district from 18 to 22. And I'll compare some of the benefits that 15 years of research now has kind of highlighted, comparing those post-secondary options in those age ranges. And then I just, everyone always asks, well, why should these programs exist? So I want to cover why these inclusive post-secondary education programs should exist, and just, again, the benefits that they provide. And then I'll give you an overview of the program that we're running at San Jose State, which will give you an idea of what an inclusive post-secondary education program looks like. So what does the college experience look like for a student with an intellectual and developmental disability? Understanding that the SJSU program is modeled after, the best, and there's the school bell that I was hoping to avoid, but how our program is modeled after kind of some exemplars that exist nationally, but also understanding that there's going to be some slight variations in those. And, because this is a state conference that's aimed at practitioners, researchers, folks in administration roles, I'm going to try and give an overview that captures how you can support enrolling students in one of these programs, how you can support starting one of these programs, and how you can, engage in supporting one of these programs anyway, just because there are so many different variations that are collaborations between county offices, districts, and universities, or are university standalone kind of programs. So we'll talk about the different routes that students can take to get to one of these programs. So a little bit about me. I am the coordinator of Project SPARTANS. I got really into making acronyms. So I'll tell you what Spartan stands for on one of the later slides. But I figured, we're the San Jose State University Spartans. Why not try and use that acronym for our program as well? But prior to my work at San Jose State, where I was a faculty member in special education, now I'm a researcher and lecturer in the College of Education. Prior to my work at San Jose State, I worked at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. So in 2015, I received a graduate assistant role. And there I helped a faculty member start Project Focus, which is another inclusive post-secondary education program. So I guess those are my starting inclusive post-secondary education bona fides. Having done it twice, I think I have some unique insights into some of the ins and outs of getting one of those programs off the ground, and then hopefully, snowballing into being a large, sustainable program supporting this student population. So should you have any questions from the district side, the administrator side, or the university side, I'm thinking I should be able to answer that. So again, happy to take those questions now, or I'll provide some contact information at the end where you can reach out to me after the conference as well. Norms for the presentation. We've got a small group, so if you've got questions, feel free to chime in the chat. You can just stop me, just get my attention somehow, and I'm happy to take questions during. Just again, this is being recorded, so that question might exist in perpetuity. So happy to answer those during or after, time permitting. So to keep us rolling, I want to talk about the history of post-secondary education options in California. I think a little known fact is that California is home to the very first post-secondary education program, which began offerings for students with intellectual disabilities all the way back in 1976. So that's Taft University in Kern County. I think it is Transition to Independent Living, TIL is their program name. I think it's undergone some revisions and modifications, obviously, since 1976. But for almost 50 years, California has been home to a post-secondary education program. And then when we think about the IDEA 1990 amendments in 1997 and 2004, transition was sort of formalized in the IEP. So those 18 to 22 vocational options, and it's kind of what the evidence-based practices and best practices around transition were sort of solidified for those PK to 12 plus environments through those amendments. But the big ones that we want to talk about when it comes to post-secondary education and just providing opportunities for students who traditionally did not have a pathway to college. We want to talk about the Higher Education Opportunity Act, which even folks at universities, so in my experience talking to both universities I've worked at and with colleagues and friends who have started inclusive post-secondary education programs at other universities, because these post-secondary ed programs are such a small part of the overall student body, like I was telling Sandia before the presentation, you know, programs that grow to 25, 30 students are considered large programs, but in the grand scheme of things, you know, at a university that has 30,000 students, it's hard to know the specific cutouts for students with intellectual and developmental disabilities in the Higher Education Opportunity Act. But what the HEOA basically says is that there are enrollment pathways for students who do not have a traditional high school diploma. So students who might have taken the CA, the California Alternative Assessment, or any alternative assessment, and might have received a certificate of completion, there is a pathway to enrollment in traditionally offered inclusive post-secondary education courses. So if you're ever in an instance where you need to advocate for one of these programs in federal legislation, there is a cutout for that student population to participate and enroll in university courses. The other big thing that the Higher Education Opportunity Act did that, again, isn't widely known is there's a carve out in there for programs to apply to be federal financial aid eligible. So students in these programs are eligible for Pell Grants once an application is complete. And I'll talk about what that application is later in the presentation, but also federal work study. So if we're thinking about job placements and vocational training, the Higher Education Opportunity Act does make federal funds available to support tuition, enrollment, and all of those things to the Pell Grant, but also inclusive work placements on a university campus through work study once an application has been filed with the federal government. Following the Higher Education Opportunity Act, a TIPSID program, so it's another arm of federal funding that's available. So TIPSID stands for Transition Program for Students with Intellectual Disabilities. So to date, there have been 3 RFPs. Traditionally, these are offered every 5 years. So 2010, 2015, 2020. And to date, 2 4-year universities in California have received them. Fresno State, the Wayfinders program, and UC Davis, the SEED program is what it is. If anyone from UC Davis sees this and I got the SEED program wrong, I apologize, but I'm pretty sure it's the SEED program. And what those do is they provide substantial federal funding to help start one of these programs, provide additional financial aid to students, and to conduct research into what the best practices for these inclusive post-secondary education programs are. And again, we can expect in 2025, hopefully, that the next round of TIPSID grants will be released. And again, those are large-scale federal grants that help start these programs and help them move towards sustainability. Another one to consider is the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act, WIOA, which was in 2014. Again, it just makes federal funding at the state level available to support any form of job training. Typically, these funds are used to do things like tuition matching, cover textbook costs, anything that might support vocational training. This makes it available, through places like Department of Rehab and vocational rehab in other states, so that if, in that person-centered plan, you demonstrate that the student is going to gain career benefits from participating in a post-secondary education program, the funds are there to support that. So again, that's for tuition, book costs, any other related training cost. And then in an awesome development, Assembly Bill 447 was passed this year. I think, I want to say less than 6 weeks ago. So this is a California specific bill that was signed by Governor Newsom, which through legislation makes state funding available for these programs to run. We don't know exactly what the numbers behind it are yet, because it is so new, but with the Assembly Bill, it does free up state dollars to hire coordinators, hire coaches. And when I talk about the structure of these programs, really it puts the people in place to support the students. It provides opportunities for students to receive funding to attend these programs. So it really kind of adds some teeth to these programs being offered. And, I hope I'm not getting ahead of myself in my slides, but one of the reasons I like to go through the history of post-secondary education options in California, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. Yeah, maybe not, is because currently there are about 300 programs offered nationally. But when we look at 4-year university offerings, or offerings that provide inclusive educational opportunities on university settings, before this year, there were really only 2 offerings in California. So you had the Wayfinders program and you had the SEED program at UC Davis, both of the TIPSID recipients. And just, recognizing that California was the first place to offer one of these all the way back in 1976, and to, kind of realize that we fell behind other states could be a little, disconcerting. But to understand that, in the last year, through some advocacy, I'm hoping to see kind of an explosion of these programs, right? We've got one of the largest public university systems in the Cal State University system, as well as the UC system, that I think can naturally support these programs. And that's what AB 447 is really aimed to do, is to make these options realistic for families and for students. And again, this might be a tangent, but another thing I want it to do is to make the idea of post-secondary education an option for all families. As someone that's helped kind of get 2 of these off the ground in different communities, what we've realized is when we reach out to families, we get the same thing of, oh, I wish I had known about this so that I could plan for years. I have a 1-year-old daughter, and I'm already kind of thinking about, what does college look like 17, 18 years from now? And, it's something that I don't like to realize, but it's been said to me, a lot of parents who have children with intellectual and developmental disabilities have said, from the time they were born to the time they graduated high school, no one ever really instilled in us this idea that my child could go to a post-secondary education option. And so we're hoping that, on a social level or a societal level, this kind of changes that we can see all students as having college as an option. And again, I think California has taken a huge step in the right direction by kind of, I'm hoping, clearing some of the red tape to making these happen. Because again, as someone who's helped start two of these things, getting them off the ground isn't the easiest thing in the world. But I'm hoping this makes it a little bit easier for programs to get started and to run. And again, I like to compare some of the focuses, because if you look on some of the websites that list what these options are, it'll list California as having about 22 of these options, but only 6 or 7 actually exist on 4-year university campuses and provide the opportunity for this population to take inclusive post-secondary education courses. So what I do want to say is California, so when I'm focused on job training focused offerings and university based offerings, California does have a robust Department of Rehab, robust regional center network, and robust just, K-12 plus set of offerings, as well as the offerings that are on community college campuses, workability. There's a ton of offerings that are available to students and to young adults. But the difference is those job training focused offerings are all about the vocational side. And if there is training, typically it's segregated from, the other young adults that are in job training. So the workplace might be forward facing customer service where you're interacting with people, which I think is a huge positive. But the offering really is, 100% focused on how do we help you, achieve a job or, be hired, which I think is great. But what we try and do in university-based offerings in these inclusive post-secondary, the bell again. What we try and do in the university-based setting is provide that college experience for the students that are enrolled. And the college experience is an academic and a social one. And it's and a vocational one. And again, I'll talk about the structure of this program here in a second, but a lot of us go to college, or any of us that went to college, didn't go there just to get a job. Our hope was to get a career in an area that we enjoyed, right? So we try and live that saying that if you do something you love, you'll never work a day in your life. And we want, the folks that go through with us to experience that. And again, like I said, there are 300 of these programs nationally. California had 2, but through the project we're working on now, we're hoping that number grows to 8 this year. And we're hoping that, someday soon we can be on all 23 CSU campuses where students are taking inclusive post-secondary courses. So for us, the students that we enroll, they're taking the first year seminar that's traditionally offered by San Jose State University. They're taking political science 101 that is offered. It intimidates me when I walk into those classes because there are 300 students there. But those are the courses that we want our students to take. And then we find a way to support them academically, and we kind of structure the program around getting them access to those courses, but also focusing on the social aspect of it. I think back to, again, my time in the university. There are so many colleagues I can reach out to across the country and just ask a question. Hey, how do you do this? How are you seeing this? What's going on? There are friends that I will have for a lifetime because of going to a university. And I think because it's inclusive and we've got our students embedded within SJSU as it would normally run, I think we're seeing some of those social benefits across student categories. So, the SJSU program, we're a semester old, so we don't necessarily have longitudinal anecdotal data. But I think about the program running at UNLV that's 8 years old now. And I think of the friends and just the social network that was built amongst, our student participants, the job opportunities that existed because of that. And I just don't think those would exist in a non 4-year program. And again, we try and do things like have our students join a club, have our students attend a football game. The coolest thing about an inclusive post-secondary ed program for me is that, if I want to go to a football game, I can ask one of our student participants, like, hey, can I be your +1 free football ticket, right? All the cool things that go along with college, going to the student union. So that's where our offerings kind of differ, is we're not necessarily 100% focused on getting a job. We're focused on supporting students in developing a resume that helps them resemble a career. I think I'm not moving enough as the lights turned off on me. And making sure that in addition to being job focused, we're focused on how do we support these students living fulfilling, independent adult lives. And that includes socialization, recreation, all of those other things. Like, I think work is an important part of adult life, but there's so much more that we can do in these university-based offerings to help students realize those lives. And that's my answers to, so why college? It's unfortunate that sometimes we get a little bit of pushback. I think every place I've ever worked has been super inclusive and super welcoming of these programs. But at some point, whether I'm doing a community information session or if I'm talking to teachers, I get this slightly deficit-minded question of, well, why should that student population go to a university, or why should someone with an intellectual disability go to college? And my pushback is, one, it's about opportunity, right? What do you get at a college that you don't get elsewhere? And it's those social networking opportunities. And it's building that vocational network as well. And the folks at universities are going to be the professionals of tomorrow. I want those professionals interacting with individuals with intellectual disability. I think we talk about inclusion from birth till adulthood. It's that exposure between people with and without disabilities that is super important. Um, you know, One of the studies we did at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, is we went to the medical school at UNLV, and we had doctors in training, medical students interact with students in the Project Focus program. And we said, hey, one day you might have a patient with an intellectual disability. Rather than just knowing the textbook definition of what intellectual disability is and all of the medical problems, how about you actually interact with, a person with intellectual disability in your training? And so many of them had said, I never knew a person, never interacted with a person with a disability, let alone an intellectual disability. Getting to interact with them and, in my training boosted my self-confidence as a medical provider for doing that. And then for our student participants, they said, I've never independently gone to a medical appointment. Getting to do that by myself makes me so much more confident in doing that. And after that, I guess before and after that study, we kind of sat together and we're talking like, wow, universities really are kind of like miniature cities existing across a couple city blocks where you have interactions with anybody and everybody, someone that's going to become a doctor, someone that's going to become a social worker, someone that's going to become a counselor, a teacher, and facilitating those interactions, I think, I'm hoping boosts community involvement, civic engagement, and just inclusion at the community level as people are going to take, leadership roles in the community. They understand and have interacted with and have seen individuals with intellectual disability. And then on the flip side, individuals with intellectual disability have opportunities to engage at the different levels of their community and feel confident in doing so. And I think college is sort of a microcosm of what the community it surrounds is. So, I think college provides a lot of built-in opportunities for this young adult population that might be difficult setting up, as you're trying to jump around to the different places in the community. So in addition to just the wonderful training and the expertise that you experience in a university course or just by going to the university, that hidden curriculum or those hidden exposures at universities and four-year settings are just super important. I don't think we call those out enough. So that's kind of my answer as to that's why I think we should have these college programs. Is it's training, but it's also exposure for students with and without disabilities. So super important, I think. And then this might be like a sharp left turn, but again, I think if you look at any of the post-school outcomes for young adults, unfortunately, when we look at earning, community engagement, independent living, quality of life indicators, it's those young adults with intellectual disability that kind of rate at the bottom in terms of earnings, employment, and the like. And that's kind of the impetus behind these programs is anyone goes to the university to improve their employment and their kind of young adult living prospects. And 15 years of research has kind of shown that for individuals with intellectual disability who typically rate at or near the bottom in young adult outcomes, for those who have gone and attended a post-secondary education program, obviously there's a drastic change, right? In some states, individuals with ID can earn below minimum wage. Not a lot of people know that. But for young adults who attend these programs, they are earning at or above minimum wage, and they have greater access to independent living, so living on their own or living in kind of the arrangement that they've chosen for themselves afterwards. We also see greater sustainment of employment because it's typically in an area that they want to be in, rather than saying like, hey, we've placed you at this restaurant or at this, back of the building type of setting. We typically see young adults that exit these programs that we're talking about stay in a job placement longer because it's in an area that they like. And it's an area they've trained for and have expertise and are able to engage with kind of the public that they're serving. So, the purpose of this slide is to state that we've had a lot of different offerings that have been super vocationally focused for students. And we've still seen young adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities lag behind adult outcomes. But these programs, again, there's 300 of them. So there's a robust set of data that's been developed since those initial 2010 TIPSID program offerings, really showing that attending a university like anyone else, even some college, benefits them long-term in a variety of post-school outcomes. Again, employment and just quality of life in general. So again, that's why these programs I think are super important, and I'm super glad that California is making them more accessible. So I'm hoping when I come back next year, or we can talk about more of these programs as well. So some of these benefits include accreditation and certification benefits. So any of these programs that have a university aligned certificate, or you complete Project Spartans and we give you a certificate of completion that SJSU has put a stamp on. Both quantitatively, it has been shown that it benefits students in employment. And then anecdotally, I can just share a number of stories where we'd reach out to employers and we'd say like, hey, we've got this student who would really like to work in the arts and entertainment business. So in Las Vegas, we were trying to place a student kind of at a backstage role for a Las Vegas show. And the person was like, hey, I've never hired or worked with a person with an intellectual disability before, but you're telling me they went to UNLV, they took these courses, and UNLV signed off on this. Like, that makes me feel a little bit more comfortable. I've met the person, I've done the interview. So that piece of paper really does boost employment opportunities. Same thing, we had a student who was really interested in kinesiology. So he went through our program with a kinesiology focus, and got kind of an equipment manager job at a gym, making a good amount of money. I'm jealous of that kid's life, by the way. He lives in his own apartment, works 32 hours a week, and just lives his best. He texts me twice a week that he's golfing, and I'm like, man, I wish I could do all this. But that's the point. We met with a gym owner who said, I don't know, but you guys say he has experience. He interviewed well, and he's got some backing of a university certificate, and he got hired. So again, it's that exposure piece. A lot of folks have said, I want to, I'm not sure. I'm trying to run a business, which I can respect. But just kind of how that uneasiness disappeared once we said, they do have training and a certificate from a university, like this person is qualified. It helped us be really successful. So both, like I said, the research kind of bears that out, and some of my own personal experience. We also, again, independent living, employment, we see higher rates for folks that have gone to these. We've talked about the benefits of the post-secondary education setting. There isn't a profession that you can't expose students to that isn't at a university setting. That's where most people go to receive professional certification. So it's all there. And then we've talked about the benefits to the participants of the inclusive post-secondary education program and their peers. So similar to a lot of inclusion research, a lot of research has been done in these programs to show that peers don't think that it has altered their university going experience. So in first year seminars, there's studies that have said, I don't think my course was watered down. I think it was a richer experience having a person with a disability there. And most people, on Likert scale style questions, report feeling an increased experience having post-secondary education programs on their campus. So I know I'm at the Inclusion Collaborative Conference, and I'm sort of preaching to the choir when I say most people find these things beneficial. But if you're ever in need of having to advocate for inclusive settings, I think knowing that people with and without disabilities highlight beneficial experiences and highlight that nothing changes, there's something added on to the experience of going to a university with a diverse population is always helpful. And again, I'll link you to some resources that kind of house a lot of that research if you ever need to use it in an advocacy setting.
Hey Matthew, just a quick question. Do
Sure.
any of the students that have gone through these programs go and do any kind of talking or outreach at high schools or at even middle schools so that, I mean, I know it was very common on our campus. We were an Avid campus. I was the first
Mhm.
Avid school in Campbell. And so we had a lot of the high school students come back. And of course, I had students that had IEPs when they were in elementary and, have moved on to resource in high school or out of the resource program. And I'm just wondering, like, this is a great um, opportunity for students who have gone through it, like your friend who's living on his own, living his great life, to go out and speak to other students who might not think college is for them as well.
Yeah. So I'm going to broadly say yes, and then say I don't want to speak for every program, but I can provide you a couple examples of um, what we've done or what I've done. So for sure, community engagement is super important. So um, as someone who did special education teacher preparation, I would ask some of those students to come to some of the courses I was teaching and just say, like, hey, talk about inclusion, talk about your experience in a post-secondary education program. I've had parents come and share, here's kind of our trajectory where we didn't think it was an option, but then we started to learn some of those. So we've taken it to future special educators, we've taken it to families. And then on the community side, I can't tell you how many gymnasiums I've sat in, either at the high school or at a community center, where we'd go to career fairs all the time or college fairs. And we would make a point to go to those special day classes, those self-contained classes, and say, hey, we want you to come to the college fair. Like, there's something there for you. We want you to participate. Um, so we've definitely done that. Um, I'm pretty sure in addition to like the college fairs, we've done presentations where the students have gone with us and spoken. Last week, I was at a conference where students from these programs were there presenting. I know a coordinator that I worked with at UNLV. They did an advocacy session with students in the program in Washington, D.C., through the Council for Exceptional Children, I believe. So the answer is yes. And I want to highlight just the power of that, because I guess in any profession or in any endeavor, you can have doubts in your mind unless you see someone like you already having done it. And that's for everyone in everything. So yes, we've done that and I encourage it. Just the other day, my wife and I were talking about, I think, our second date. She remarks about how I showed up in a shirt, a tie, and with one of the project participants because I just forgot that we had a date. And I was like, hey, Clayton's coming with, and I might be in a shirt and tie, even though this is like a casual thing. So yeah, it only because of that, I think I remember all of the things that we did. And yeah, we kind of called it going on tour, just to raise awareness of these programs. I think part of it is recruiting for your own program, but also letting people know that others exist. So I know as part of the consortium I'm in, we're at San Jose State, but we're also working with Cal State East Bay, San Francisco State University. So even if we're not recruiting for us, we can say like geographically, there's a couple options for you. Southern California's got a couple, Fresno's central of the state. Davis is a little bit farther north. So I think all of us, in addition to recruiting for our own, are just talking about all the different options that are available. So I hope that answered your question. And then the other thing I want to do is kind of just give an overview of what our program looks like, so that you can kind of see like what the day-to-day operations of an inclusive post-secondary education program look like. So it's, to the greatest extent of our ability, just a traditional college day for students, but the support and infrastructure we provide looks a little bit different. So again, our goal is to provide opportunities that are educational, social, vocational, and when the time is right, residential experiences that prepare students for competitive employment and independent living. So the thing that drives us every day is thinking about competitive, integrative employment. We want our students competing for jobs like anyone else would, but winning that competition for a job, and that it be integrative employment. So it is at or above minimum wage. I hope that no one earns minimum wage, but for some of us where, in previous programs and in programs that I've talked to, participants have earned below minimum wage because I think there's some outdated laws in and around that. So getting those students to just the wage that others earn in their area is super important for us. But that it's integrative as well, so that it's not like you're in the back just washing dishes all the time, but you get opportunities to deliver customer service. You get opportunities to engage with your coworkers and the people that are coming to your work site. And then independent living, right? We want folks to be able to live on their own to the extent that they want and to engage in their communities. So a lot of text there. But what Spartan stands for is, and I'm very proud of this, it took me like 3 days to figure out, but it's the successful post-secondary access and related transition activities for neurodiverse students, and they're working towards an occupational career life studies certificate. So it's Project Spartans or the Spartans OCLS program. But what we have our students do is they take courses, they take internships, and we want them to engage in social activities and campus events. So those social activities can be, I don't know what they are, but I know like when you walk down a certain avenue of the university, like when I'm trying to grab lunch, there is just nothing but student organizations with tables set up. We want our students to go engage in those. When there's activities on campus, if our students are interested, we want them to go. If there's a football game, or I know the College of Arts and Music will put on concerts and plays. Like if our students are interested, they get free tickets to those things because they're traditionally, they're enrolled SJSU students, so they have those benefits. We want them to access those. And then in terms of how the courses and internships work, again, we want them to be taking those alongside their peers. So it's a traditional political science 101 class. If we want to talk about community engagement, what better place to learn how to engage in your community than political science 101? We've identified some courses that are independent living focused, like personal budget management. I don't think that's the title of the course, but it's like intro to finance, and it's how do you manage your finances, where do you put your money, how are you money smart and money safe. Other courses can be nutrition, where you're learning how to make meals for yourself, cook for yourself, but again, it's a course that is traditionally offered by SJSU, in addition to English 101, public speaking 101, all of those things that we think students can gain valuable vocational skills taking. And so the way we kind of organize the program is, right now we are a non-degree 2-year program, and again, we're a semester old. We are working towards having our students graduate with an SJSU sponsored certificate, so that occupational career life studies certificate. And students will, across the 2 years, take 36 credits. It's not a firm 2 years, so just like any course of study is 2 or 4 years, some students take 3, 4, 5 years to complete it. Our main goal right now is that students just take the 36 credits. Our ideal is that they finish it in 2 years, but there's some leeway there, like there would be for any other university student. And again, it's 2 to 3 courses per semester with at least 6 units taken. And so we again tried to model this after, one, exemplar programs, but two, sort of the general college experience, where you take a general core of courses, you take a job track or career track of courses, and some of those we mostly call that a major, and then you have a supervised internship or internship seminar. So a general core is typically going to be what we consider those prerequisite courses, what we all took in undergraduate. And then based on that student specific needs, that general core can be a little bit different. But typically we're looking for something like a first year seminar to help students orient themselves to the university, to set themselves up for success. A public speaking, so that as we're thinking about social skills in the workplace, social skills in general, and just communication, those students take that same course with their peers. They're learning communication strategies. It can be general finance. It can be any, English 101, any of those like level 100 courses we want our students to take, so that they're gaining some of those, valuable core academic skills. And then the job track is going to be based on that student's interest. So, if we have a student who's interested in education or working with children, we'll find courses in the College of Education in child and adolescent development, in early childhood, that they can take to where they do have some level of expertise in an area that they want to go into. And then we'll match that with an internship to where they kind of grow in responsibility over time. So like I said, I've had students who are interested in kinesiology. So they would take, physical exercise courses. They would take relevant anatomy courses, nutrition courses, so that they could go into a job setting focused on personal fitness or, wellness, and they would have some expertise behind it. But then we would pair that with an internship. So for example, I became a special education teacher. I took special education courses, and then I did a few levels of student teaching. So for, one of the students we had who took those kinesiology courses, again, this is the same student that I'm jealous of. He got to work a paid internship at the Student Rec Center. to where he was an equipment manager. He was checking things out and he was supervising areas. And then the next 2 semesters, he was an equipment manager for the football team. And you would not believe how much cool free stuff he got from like sweatshirts and team swag. And then in his final semester, I believe he was the team manager for the women's volleyball team. So he got to go do and experience a lot of cool stuff in those roles. And again, just super boosted his resume to where, he has that job. Another example, I talked about the young man who works kind of behind the scenes at a show. Again, he took theater courses. He took like stage management courses, and then interned at productions on campus to where he was doing behind the stage stuff. He was doing inventory, all of those things to build relevant job experience, and now works backstage at a show off the strip. So a lot of cool stuff that came of those things. A final example, again, we had a young lady who was interested in working in a preschool. So she took early childhood education courses, and then she interned at across all 3 semesters with growing responsibility. She interned at the on-campus preschool. So first it was kind of like in an observation, helping small groups. And then she moved into paid positions in her last 2 internship seminars. And that's what we're trying to replicate at San Jose State again. We're 1 semester in, but our student is already interested in working with individuals with disabilities. His goal. So right now he's working at an adapted swim class. It's Sammy Swim that's offered by SJSU on Saturdays. So he's interning there. And we're hoping that, we find, and I think this last week or within the last week or so, he volunteered at Special Olympics. Again, we're trying to build resumes that help people kind of funnel into jobs and places they want. And just university settings are wonderful for that. And this is just some SJSU specific stuff. So right now we are not a dual enrollment option. That's a lot of other hoops to jump through, but that's where students can be enrolled at a local high school district, but also enrolled concurrently in one of these post-secondary education programs. And I'll talk about what that stuff looks like in a second. And then the admission process. I think our coordinator, this is super tiny, I'm sure, but to walk you through it, we try and follow a traditional university admission process where a student will submit transcripts, and what we're looking for is a certificate of completion or some participation in the California Alternative Assessment, documentation that the student has an intellectual or developmental disability. And then we have students submit personal statements that can be written, recorded, anything that's accessible to that student. And then we go through a review. We interview the student, we interview the families, we do campus tours, campus orientations. And then when we come to decide to enroll the student, we go through a person-centered planning process where we figure out what is it that you want to do? What are your interests? Do you want to go to college? We've had some families really push for their child to go to college. And then when we met with the child, they're like, I don't want to go to college. And that's normal. Like, not every young adult goes to college. And we don't think it should be any different for individuals with disabilities as well. So we asked them, is this something that you want to do? And some have said no. And so we didn't move forward because we didn't want to have that student kind of doing something that wasn't up their alley. And then from that person-centered planning process, we develop this course of study, the core, the job track, and then the internships. And again, like any other college student, these things could change. A student could come in and say, I want to do art. I want to do early childhood education. Talk to any 18-year-old. That is not unique to individuals with disabilities. We know folks at the university change majors, change focuses several times. And again, our goal is to allow program completers to go into an area that is of their interest, and that they'll stay in for a long time. So we don't want to just say, hey, you chose this your first semester, like we're just going to push through with that. Um, Again, we try and do it that way. And then we try and figure out, what does the support infrastructure need to look like for that student. So we try and enroll them as traditionally as possible, to where they get the SJSU student ID, they get the student benefits like access to the gym, access to the health center, access to campus events. And then we start thinking about, now that you're enrolled in this course, let's kind of talk to the faculty about what that's going to look like, because we don't want to make faculty feel uncomfortable. We provide any support to faculty that we can in terms of training or just out of course support. And then we try and provide our Spartan coaches or mentors along the way, so that students have in and out of class support as it relates to getting their coursework and things completed. So semester to semester planning and certificate completion. Again, our goals, it's sort of like an IEP for a university, that person-centered plan, but we find areas of interest and goal areas for academics, career development, self-determination, and then community and campus engagement. And then we drive all of the support that we provide to that student in those areas. So we figure out, what academic support do they need? What career development support do they need? How can they be supported in making their own decisions? And then how do they engage in the campus or community, whether that's transportation, working on social skills to engage in different environments, and the like. And then just some more general program information. Right now, we're housed in the College of Health and Human Sciences, the College of Education, and the College of Professional and Global Education. I would say 90% of these programs are housed in a College of Education in the Department of Special Education, because that's sort of a natural fit. But I'm happy to say that we have partnerships across campus. So it's, even though I'm affiliated with the Department of Special Education, I'm glad that we're also housed elsewhere. It just broadens our participation in the university. And then, so what our peer coaches do, and this is not universal, so they don't do this for every student. Again, everything we do is individualized and person-centered. But some options that typical coaches will provide is, they might attend a class with a student, make sure they feel comfortable. Again, going to a class with 300 people for the first time can be very intimidating if your whole life have only attended class with 8 other students. Sometimes they'll take notes, but again, we try and make it as natural as possible. The things we don't want to see are, if a peer asks them a question, they look at the peer coach and say, what do I say? That's not what the peer coach is there for. Again, we try and prep students for success. The peer mentor is really there to make sure that, the student is accommodated and has all the things that they need to be successful. But in terms of socialization, they try and pull back and let that socializing be as natural as possible in the course. So group projects, study groups, they might try and facilitate some of those things, but we let the students do that as much as possible. They'll support, the student with individual goals, things like time management, campus navigation, and budgeting. Even though they were adults, I remember as the graduate assistant, I kind of served every role, from coordinator, peer mentor, all of those things. I remember the first time our first student had a class across campus. I'd gone with him for the first 3 weeks, dropped him off. And then I was like, all right, week 4, I feel pretty good about this. Like, you can do this on your own. I kind of felt like a parent that was just like releasing a child to school for the first time. And then, had to, if anyone watched me, it would probably look super suspicious, but, I was like trailing behind, letting the student go independently, not letting them know I was following them to make sure they got there. So I'm sure that looked super weird in general to anyone watching me do it. But so those are things that we'll do, right? That natural fading of support over time, so that student is experiencing, the highest level of independence that they can. Sometimes they'll serve the role of job coach in internship placements. Sometimes, they'll create new goals and they'll collect some data for us so that we're, constantly improving our program. We like to be as data centered as possible. And then we like our mentors to kind of just identify what are those opportunities and events on campus. As much as I like to think I'm young and cool still, I don't know what the kids are doing these days. So outside of like football games and stuff, if students can say, hey, there's this student organization, there's this student event, we'll try and plan one of those so that our students can be involved in things that are going on the campus. And again, our peer mentors are typically recruited undergraduates or graduate students who are just kind of in the know for those things. And then just other supports that, this is a lot of the red tape that you need to navigate sometimes that I'm hoping AB 447 makes a little bit easier. So through Department of Rehab and our regional center, so I want to shout out all the folks that help us there. We receive tuition support for students. On our end, it's important that we kind of justify, hey, this program leads to these employment outcomes, because that's what DOR and SARC, or SARC is our regional center, but all regional centers are tied to. We have to justify, like, how does this lead to that? And that's why we collect data to show that, but they'll provide tuition support. And that's for all students with disabilities. But for students with intellectual disability, that person-centered plan and our sort of non-traditional program helps that way. There's funding for peer mentor or job coaches, so those folks that I just mentioned. There's state funding there to help pay those graduate assistants that serve a variety of roles. At SJSU, we have the Accessible Education Center. Other universities might call that the Disability Resource Center. So if we need assistive or instructional technology, DOR can help facilitate some of that, but there's also some naturally on campus. And then finding job placements, as much as we want to provide them on campus when we can, if there is a better job placement that is a paid internship opportunity as well off campus, Department of Rehab and Regional Center will support that as well. And they'll support it holistically in terms of how do we get the student there transportation wise, how do we set up a job coach, reasonable accommodations on that job site. Department of Rehab will provide a lot of the financial and human capital that we need to make those things work. And then we'll provide some information too, if anyone watching this ever wants to volunteer, come check out Project Spartans in action one day. Again, our campus partners, we work with Open University because that's how our students enroll. The Accessible Education Center, so our students get accommodations as necessary in class. The Career Center. So there's a lot of stuff that I think we were looking at doing on our own that we realized, oh, the Career Center already does that. And there's so many realizations that we've come to about the university setting where we're like, oh, we need to do this, we need to do this. And we're like, oh, wait, no, that's already on campus. The Career Center is one of those. So interview skills, resume development, job networking, most career centers on campuses do those things already. So rather than us taking that on, that is an inclusive opportunity for our students to go to. And then we've reached out to a number of excited and willing internship sites, our student union. And again, we don't want it to be somewhere where students are kind of sheltered away. Like in the student union, you are forward facing and interacting with other students. The Spartan Bookstore, again, every student goes there. The Recreation and Aquatic Center, and then our main library on campus. And then based on what our other students' needs are, we're hoping there are more relevant and exciting partners that we can partner with in the future. And then finally, the general information I want to provide to you about other inclusive post-secondary education programs. Something important to ask is, are you a CTP? And CTP stands for Certified Transition Program. Earlier, I talked about how to receive financial aid, you do need to submit an application with the federal government. and that is the Certified Transition Program application. We are currently in process of applying. So SJSU is going through their own financial aid reapplication. We're now a part of that. And then once that goes through, our students would fill out the FAFSA and receive aid like any other student would based on need. And then we will be eligible to use financial aid work study dollars to provide on-campus paid working internships for students as well. Other questions you can ask if you are looking at other post-secondary education programs is, what is your program structure? Is it a 2-year program, a 4-year program? Is there a residential option? Do students who enroll in this program get to live on campus? What do students earn at the end of it? Again, we're in process of applying to be an SJSU certification or credential. And again, I think participating in these programs generates benefits, but if you leave the program with a school sponsored certification, it just boosts your employability prospects that much more. And then just ask what the course structure is. Are they traditionally offered courses? Are they credit, non-credit, or do students audit? And again, these programs have different ways for each of those to still count program hours towards student completion. The biggest resource I want to make you aware of, though, is Think College. So this is the National Coordinating Center for Inclusive Post-Secondary Education Programs. And they provide a lot of cool things. So a college search, in that college search, you can see program descriptions. They provide info briefs. So if you're like, how can I be more inclusive? This is the housing place for, post-secondary education research. And then they also provide training materials, templates. They provide the CTP application template that, I've used multiple times. So this is a wonderful resource for parents, families, educators, administrators, and even other folks that if there's someone else at a CSU that wants to run one of these programs, I think this is a great place to start. And I'm hoping I can zoom in here. I can. Super proud to say that on their recently added programs, you'll see San Jose State University there and our partners at East Bay as well. But yeah, so you'll see a map of where they are. You click on a specific program, they'll let you know, program structure, residential options, all of those things.
This is so great, Matt. I'm hoping I can link this to our warm line, because I think they often get calls from parents, from caregivers about, post-secondary and where to look things up and how to look things up. And so this is a great resource to link parents to. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And then if you do have any other questions, here are some helpful links for us and contact information. So feel free to reach out to any of us. I am not doing this alone. I'm fortunate to have Dr. Ji-Hoon Lee, who is our director, Dr. Sudha Krishnan, who is the other coordinator with myself, kind of running these programs. So it's a happy coincidence. I know, I think it was I want to say February 2020, Kathy Wall, who occupied Sandia's role before retiring, met on campus with me and the dean of the College of Education to discuss one of these programs. But I like to point out that did happen in February 2020. So some things put that on hold. And then a few years later, I want to say early 2022, Dr. Ji-Hoon Lee came to me and said, "Hey, I heard you have some experience in these programs. Do you want to get one started?" So this has been in the works for a little bit, but I'm glad that we're off the ground now. And if students in the Bay Area who are interested, we're not residential yet, so we do have to get folks in our general community that are interested. Please send them our way. We're happy to talk to families. And right now, I'm joking that we're on tour. So I will be in a gymnasium near you talking about this program soon. So that is my presentation, folks. Happy to take any questions should you have them. And if you don't have any now, please shoot me an email. Our goal is to broaden this network to make inclusive post-secondary ed programs an option for any and all students in California.